Okay, full moon astrology reading. It is February 21st, but I will be posting this video on the day of the full moon, which is Saturday the 24th. And I like to post these on the day of the actual full moon. A lot of astrologers will do astrology beforehand as like a predictive thing to anticipate what's going to happen. And I don't like to do that because I think of it more as like an acupuncture point, that it's like, okay, this is some insights for the day of that are about reflection and looking back at the past as much as it's about projecting into the future. Because as beings living in time, we exist at the intersection of the past and the future at all times. And but we are influencing and influenced by both of those polarities equally. And so I don't like to think of astrology as a fortune telling, but more as a gathering of the energies that are coming into us from every direction in space and time. And I call it an astrology reading, but really this is these videos that I'm doing part of a series every month now, is insights into wisdom traditions from many cultures. That's part of this larger system I've created called the Eternal Dragon, that synthesizes many different teachings that all have this like harmonic number mathematical basis, and astrology is one of those. And if we tune into the timing of astrology, into the rhythms, the harmonic rhythms of the planets and these celestial bodies, it helps us to attune to the natural rhythms of life. But it's just one lens to look at it through. And so through these shares, I'm going to be talking about the planets, but also these other concepts which have a lot more depth to them. And if you want to learn more about the Eternal Dragon, I'm creating a whole book and a set of archetype cards that's similar to the tarot with this really beautiful art I've been working on for a long time. So click the link in the description below if you want to learn more about that. You can sign up for my newsletter. I'll be creating courses on all of this kind of stuff and online communities to join. There's a lot of really cool things that I've got coming in store. As part of that, I've been doing a card of the day for just a small group, an intimate circle right now. And it's interesting to see how a so-called random card of the day, or like a tarot card reading, has this insightful meaning as much as something as astrology, astrology has this deterministic basis to it, where we can see exactly the position that the planets are going to be in thousands of years into the future, versus something that is a luck of the draw kind of experience. And after studying all of this stuff for many years and doing I Ching readings where you're flipping coins, and also using these complex Chinese astrology systems to look at the I Ching, it all has meaning. It all has this value. It somehow is always speaking to us. And it just goes to show that I don't think there's such a thing as randomness. The universe is always in this dialogue with us. And so I want to share, I have a calculation now, so I can look at what the card is going to be for the card of the day for Saturday. So for those of you in my group, this is a little sneak peek on what the card's going to be. And the card for the day of the full moon is the fire card. And the fire card is part of the Chinese five elements system. And there's a quote that goes with every card. And the quote for the fire card is, "Set your life on fire. Seek those who fan your flames." That's from Rumi. And fire has an interesting nature to it, because fire has both a destructive, cleansing nature to it, and it also produces light and heat. The fire of stars is what it creates the energy that fuels life on Earth, and fire also has this incredibly destructive quality, through forest fires, and it's also the basis of human technology, as it's what has allowed us to create cooked food and to create warmth when they're during the winter and during nighttime, and also to forge metal. Fire is the basis of the growth of human ingenuity in a way. And so, as you're contemplating your life going into this next month, this next full moon cycle, as well as all the insights I'm going to be sharing during this reading, keep that in the background as a framing of what needs to be cleansed out of your life, what needs to go through a destructive cycle, and then what wants to be brought forth. What is the illumination, the light that wants to be brought forth out of your being during this time? And I'll get into more of how that is certainly a theme that's present in the astrology for this coming month. So first off, before I get into looking at the chart and some of these other things, I'd love to start these with a little meditation. So I invite you to get really comfortable, to get grounded, to find your seat, and step into a posture of open receptivity. I'm going to play a little music here. Just finding your root, feeling your crown nice and tall. Feeling yourself grounded, balanced. And connecting to that sense of having an inner fire. It lives inside all of us, and we can just tap into it. No matter how stuck we're feeling, we can tap into a feeling of having an inner fire. So just feeling that, feeling it permeating through your being. And if your eyes have been closed, slowly come back into the room. Open your eyes. Maybe wiggle your fingers and toes a little bit. I don't think the music actually came on while I was sharing that. But that is okay. That's what was meant to happen, apparently. All right. So, as I start to talk about the astrology for the day, I also want to talk about the numerology for the day. So, February 24th, 2024 is 2/24, 2024. So it's clearly a very strong energy of 2s and 4s. And in the tarot system, I want to show you the cards for the number 2 and the number 4. And you can think about every number as having an essence. Every number is an entire dimension in itself. And when we look at the qualities of a certain number, we can see what the essence of that number is. We can often think of numbers as something that are dead and not really alive, but numbers have these living, breathing qualities to them. So the 2 and the 4 are these cards of what I call the witch, which is called the high priestess in the traditional tarot, and the emperor. And the 2 is the witch because 2 is the number of duality. It's the polarity of self and other. It's light and dark. It is up and down. Everything in the universe has a polarity to it. And you can understand that all of the numbers are nested within the numbers that are above them. So all of the universe it comes from an emptiness, a 0, and that emptiness has a oneness to it. And then within that oneness, when the oneness starts to look at itself, to become self-aware, there is an experience of self and other. And we have that constant experience of I'm myself and there is the world that I am living in and I'm experiencing. And the coming into contact with the manifestation of who we are is the energy of desire. And so the witch, it's called the witch because it's this pure primal desire. It's this like unbridled feminine power. And the 2, you can see on the witch, the symbol of the 2 is this shape called the Vesica Pisces, which is that it is no coincidence that it's a picture of the openings that are in the body, of the eye, of the mouth, of the womb. And so it's the point of contact between the inside and the outside. And so it is the gateway through which we experience contact with that which we are perceiving. So that's the witch. And then the 4 energy is the emperor. The 4, if you think about what the number 4 is, it's a square. It's also everything in existence is made of spinning spheres, of atoms, of stars and planets spinning. And in a spinning sphere, there are naturally 4 points that emerge. That there's the north and south pole, and then there's an east and west directionality. And similarly, those spinning spheres create all of these cycles, like cycles of night and day, cycles of a year, that have these sine wave qualities to them, where there's a peak and a trough and an ascent and a descent. And this is where we get 4 seasons, that it's like winter and summer are the north and south poles, and then spring and autumn are the east and the west. And so the emperor is the embodiment. It's called the emperor because it's these structures. It's the force of life that is holding the structure of reality together. And so these 2 cards together in this date of 2/24/2024, they are like the nature of the energy of the vibration going into this next cycle. The full moon being this kind of like axis point that's like creating these rhythms. And so as well as with the fire being this random card that's being presented, and these being these numerological cards that are being presented. It's like, what are the desires that you're pursuing, and what are the structures that you're creating to enable them to happen? And it's like the fire of your desires. It's really interesting how these things line up too. Like looking at your desires from a perspective of fire, and then also what is the structure that is going to keep the boundaries in place, that is not going to let things burn out of control, that is not going to let the fire go out. There has to be a solid container for a fire to be held, or it'll be blown out by the wind. So that's like the structure of the emperor. So all of these things are invitations of what to think about in this this upcoming month. I'm going to turn the light on. It's getting dark here where I am. And it's interesting. I felt called today also to wear this hat that I haven't worn in a while, which is my jiu-jitsu hat. This is the Half Gracie jiu-jitsu logo. As this is a reminder for me of something that helps me feel a lot of fire in my life, and also feel this strong structure of feeling a rhythm of going and being with people in this kind of disciplined way for a practice of mastery that also builds a lot of feeling of fire in my body. So it felt like an appropriate piece of clothing to wear for today. Okay, so that's some preliminary framing, and now let's get into the actual charts. And I say charts for a specific reason. And there's something I want to talk about here that feels important to mention before. Again, there's a lot of preamble, but we're getting to it. This feels important to talk about in light of a lot of things that I have been seeing online, on social media, on Instagram recently, about what the Zodiac is. And I hear people saying things like, Pluto's not going into Aquarius, the sun's not in Aquarius, this is not that. There's actually 13 constellations, and like the whole system is completely off, and people having a lot of feelings about this. And I just want to clarify something about what the Zodiac actually is and what we're actually looking at when we look at an astrology chart. Because there are multiple lenses to view it from, just like there's multiple lenses from which to view anything. And I'm going to take a little detour here, and bear with me as I talk about this. So I'm going to show you a chart of numbers. And some of you are probably familiar with what is called the Fibonacci sequence. And the Fibonacci sequence is the most simple sequence in mathematics, where we just take a number and then keep adding it to the previous number. So 1 plus 2 equals 3, 3 plus 2 equals 5, 5 plus 3 equals 8, and so on, going up. And if we take that sequence going up, there doesn't seem to be any kind of pattern to it whatsoever. But if we just chop off the last digit of the sequence, and just so obviously for the first numbers, it's just the number itself, but then for 13, we just take 3, 21, we take 1, and so on. If the number is 121393, we just take the last number, 3. So this here is a list of just the last number in the Fibonacci sequence. And if we just look at these numbers, it actually repeats every 60 increments. So it creates this rhythm of 60. Now, if we look at the Lucas numbers, which is a very similar sequence, lesser known, but equally important in mathematics, and it's the same exact thing, except we just switch the first two. So Fibonacci goes 1, 2, Lucas goes 2, 1. And so it goes 2, 1, 3, 4, 7. And so it's the same pattern, but we get we get different numbers. And the Lucas numbers repeat every 12. So we see this 2, 1, 3, 4, 7, 1, 8, 9. And then if we go to the 12th number, then we see it start again. 2, 1, 3, 4, 7, 1, 8, 9. So, and it just goes on and on. And if I were to iterate this out, it would just repeat and repeat every 12. So what do we see here? We see a repeating cycle of 12 and 60. Where do we see those numbers? On a clock. So if we look at a clock face, here I've taken the Lucas numbers, these numbers in the Lucas sequence, and drawn them out in a clock, and we get 12 hours in a day. And then if we take these Fibonacci sequence, we get 60 minutes in an hour, 60 seconds in a minute, 60 degrees, or 60 minutes within a degree when we're looking at coordinate points. And a really interesting pattern emerges here. So we can see that we got the 12 numbers for the Lucas sequence, but in the Lucas sequence, the even numbers 2, 4, 8, and 6 are here on this cardinal axis points. So on the up and down and the left and right are the even numbers. And then within the Fibonacci numbers, we see we have 0 at each of the same points. So we have 0 at the 12 o'clock position, and the 3, and the 6, and the 9 o'clock position, if we were looking at it as a clock. And furthermore, we have 5s at the other increments of the numbers. So we have 0, 5, 5, 0, 5, 5, 0, 5, 5, 0, 5, 5, going all the way around, making a cycle of 12. And so the cycle of 12 increments is not arbitrary. There may be 13 constellations. There's actually 88 named constellations and tons of stars, but these constellations were just bearing points from which to perceive these cycles of 12. There is a mathematical harmonic to the number 12 and dividing time into these kinds of increments that is not arbitrary at all. So that's where we get the zodiac from. The zodiac is the division and the patterns that happen within this cycle of 12, which exists in everything that has a life cycle. So there's a year, which has these 12 months, which approximate the zodiac, but we also have the cycle of a person's life. There's the same phases that we go through in our own lifetime. In a day, the springtime, the energy of Aries is like the energy of March when all of life is waking up, and it's also the energy of the dawn when the day is waking up. And so it's these cyclic patterns that can be applied to every scale and everything that has a life cycle. It's not, and they're just named after the constellations that were these original bearing points for doing seafaring. So that's something important to understand as we look at the zodiac. And I'm actually, as we go into the chart, I'm going to show you 3 different lenses of how to look at a chart that perceive the zodiac in different ways. And you'll see what I mean as we get into it. Okay, so now I'm going to get into the actual chart itself. So first of all, we're going to look at the tropical astrology chart. And a tropical chart is based on the position of the Earth in relation to the sun. So the north point on the zodiac chart is on the zodiac in a tropical chart is when the solstice is it's during the solstice when the axis is tilted completely away from the sun. So it's about the cycle of the year and the Earth's positioning in the relationship to the sun. So we're going to go over that first, and then I'm going to show you 2 other charts which give an interesting different kind of perspective on this. So here is our tropical zodiac chart. Now, we're going to go look at a couple of patterns taking place in this chart. So, first of all, we're in an interesting time right now when all of the planets are direct, and even all of the asteroids have gone direct, except for Juno here. But all of these, even lesser asteroids, Ceres, Pallas, even some of the centaurs, Chiron, Chariklo, everything is direct. It's a time of a lot of forward movement, very appropriate for the fire energy happening. We just saw a lot of the outer planets were going retrograde during the fall, and now they're all moving direct. So it's a period of a lot of forward movement happening. So when we look at this chart too, we can see that there is a conjunction between the Sun, Mercury, and Saturn. And opposing, on the full moon, the moon is always opposing the Sun. So there's a tension line between the moon and Virgo and the Sun, Mercury, Saturn. So Sun and Mercury, it's a time when a lot of mental energy is available. Mercury is the mind and communication. So it's our ability to conceive of things and have a sharp-mindedness. But it's also coming into contact with Saturn, where Saturn is the planet of obstacles and challenges. And all three being conjunct in Pisces. And during this moment of, we can look at, I'm in the East Coast of the United States, different places on the planet, the houses will be different. But here it's also in the 12th house, which is the house of Pisces. So Pisces is the deep dreamer. It's the time during a day cycle. Pisces is right before we wake up. It's when the most intense dreaming is happening. It's when the messages from the depth of the subconscious are surfacing. And so there's a lot of ability for us to have mental insight into that right now. But there's also a challenge coming up. So it's like we have this acuity for it, but it's also, there's challenges in communicating our dreams. Very interesting. And it's like our dreams as like our nighttime dreams, but it's also our dreams for what we want to imagine into the future. Pisces is the realm as the dreamer. It's the realm where anything's possible. It's like we can imagine any idea we want to see as what is a possibility. While at the same time, we see the moon in Virgo. And Virgo is the opposite. Virgo is about service. It's about harvesting things in a practical sense. It's about being useful. Virgo is earthy. Pisces is watery. So there's this tension between those things. So it's like our feelings are being directed towards how do we be of service, whereas there's this mental, like dreaming activation and challenge happening. As with any tension line, it's always the question of how can we resolve that tension? How can we actually see how they're unified? Because the illusions are the opposites are always illusions that are to be rectified and brought together. This dynamic is made more easeful with this positioning of Jupiter. So you can see here there's a triangle being formed of this red line and the green and the blue. So the green line is a trine aspect and the blue line is a sextile aspect, which are both smoothly flowing relationships. So this figure, what we call it, like a three or more shape in astrology, is called a mystic triangle. And the mystic triangle has this tension line, but it has this other part that makes it more easeful. So it's like it's this activation that is possible through this third point, which kind of smooths it out. So Jupiter in Taurus is this. Jupiter is our expansiveness. It's where our growth. It's fertility. And Jupiter in Taurus there's this expansiveness into the realm of the material, into finding expansion of our wealth, expansion of our material resources, expansion of our life circumstances. So in being of service, our feelings in the moon of being of service, and orienting that towards how do we expand our wealth. And also Jupiter is coming into a loose conjunction. It's going to be going more and more into a tighter conjunction with Uranus. It's within 10 degrees now, which is it's not that close, but it's close enough to be considered a conjunction. But over the next couple weeks and months, it will go into more of a strong conjunction with Uranus. Uranus is about revolutions and innovation. So it's as this sign gets closer, it's like how do we revolutionize our ways of making money. This is really interesting. This is interesting in the larger patterns taking place too, having to do with Pluto, which I'll get to in a minute. So this whole mystic triangle diagram is making this opening around these themes that I've mentioned. It's like how do we get through the challenges in the ideas? There may be some obstacles happening, and how do we ideate of what we want to dream, and then bring that into the realm of like emotively being of service and creating new structures of wealth and making money, and orienting it to this Taurus energy, which is the steady groundedness. That's the real quality of Taurus. At the same time that Jupiter is making a square, a difficult aspect with Mercury and Mars conjunct. So with Venus and Mars. So Venus and Mars together is an interesting aspect because Venus is about what we love and what we're attracted to, and Mars is this activation energy, it's the war god. So it's like where we have this like vitality and energy to go forward into something. So when it's mixed with Venus, it's this really like it's a great aspect because it's this harmoniousness of where we have vitality flowing into something, and it's in Aquarius. So Aquarius is about exploration, and it's about collaboration with other people and finding new ways of making teamwork, which is making a square with Taurus. So I see that showing up in my own life as like there's this drive for grounding, and also this kind of like opening of, oh, I want to do all these different things, and I want to work with this person, and I want to see this thing, and I want to do this training. That's like this kind of Mars Venus energy in Aquarius. Aquarius being an air sign. It's like there's a flightiness to it, versus Taurus has this grounded energy. So it's, again, how do we create that grounding? Allow that all that vitality and love of doing that to come forth, but ground it, always ground it, and see how those two things can come together. Okay, Pluto. Pluto has been a big theme recently, and will be for the next year. Pluto is doing something very unique, which is it has gone into Aquarius. Pluto is now in Aquarius after being in Capricorn for 20 years or so. Pluto creates these eras as it moves through each sign. It's like 20 years in each sign. So it creates these sort of like generational eras, and it's really about the underworld. Pluto is about the underworld, and so it's like what is being transformed. What kind of transformational processes are happening? Oh, excuse me. Oh, God. What is happening? There we go. Sorry about that. So this past 20-year cycle, I really see it as this transformation of our understanding of systems of rulership, of wealth. I see like all of the stuff with like the 2008 financial collapse and the Occupy Wall Street movement, and even this GameStop a whole thing that they just made a movie about, of this sort of like upheaval, this like looking into the underworld and questioning like, hey, wait a minute, like what are these structures of power, and what, like let's actually examine them and like look under the rock to see what's there. Pluto is now moving out of Capricorn into Aquarius. So it's now moving into this phase of like, how do we do that underworld excavation, examining of how we collaborate with people? How do we explore? Aquarius is like this exploratory phase. It's this weird time, it's this 3 a.m. kind of witching hour time. And so how do we examine the strangeness, but also how do we come together through the strangeness? That's really what I see coming on in this Pluto Aquarius time. Interestingly, Pluto is going to be in Aquarius for the next until September, and then it goes retrograde and goes back into Capricorn for a brief like month or so, and then it will go direct into Aquarius, where it will stay for the next 20 years. Interestingly, Pluto will dip back into Capricorn and be in Capricorn during the U.S. election. So do not be surprised if there's this feeling of opening, of this like kind of surging of new ways of being, and then a return back into old patternings during the election time. I don't want to like make a prediction about what's going to happen because it all has to do with where we put our focus, where we put our attention. These are waves of energy that are moving around us, but we have this free will of how we surf those waves. So it's where we put our focus, where we put our energy, where we put our mind, our energy will flow there. And so it's about stepping into the highest vibration that we can embody while also allowing whatever's going to happen to happen and trusting the process in it. But that's just something interesting to note about the upcoming cycle. All of the planets are going to be direct for a while. Mercury goes retrograde on April 1st. And then after that, excuse me, let me just look at my notes here. Mercury goes retrograde on April 1st, and then April 29th is when Pluto goes retrograde. Excuse me, Pluto goes retrograde on April 29th, but it goes back into Capricorn in September. So this next 6 weeks or 5 weeks now, from the end through the end of February and the whole month of March, is this very direct period. A lot of forward momentum happening, a lot of forward movement. So during this time, whatever's happening in your life that you need to get into motion, that you need to get into action, and you probably know what that is, this is the time to do it in this next period of 5-6 weeks or so. Make it happen. Yet take advantage of the energy that's there, because then there will be a returning back to the old patterns. Mercury retrograde for the month of April, and then starting in April, then Pluto going retrograde. Then in June, and almost the same day, Neptune and Saturn are going retrograde. So that's another period, and then the outer planets continue to go retrograde after that. So take advantage of this time with the energy being direct. Anchor in your systems. Find your ways of creating wealth that are also serving people and bringing your dreams into fruition. Start to look at ways that we work together with other people. Allow that energy to open. Allow yourself to put energy into what feels good. Venus is what feels good. What feels good in relating with other people. If you have agreements and structures with loved ones and with colleagues and things like that, let them drop. Pluto is starting to move into Aquarius too. So it's like examining those qualities of like, how do we collaborate with other people? If it's not feeling in the highest service, let it go. So all of these things are kind of the patterns that are happening in the next month. Cool. All right, so now I want to show you something very interesting, because in this chart, what we're looking at, like I said, is the tropical chart, which places the zodiac based on where the solstices and equinoxes are. There's another kind of chart called the draconic chart, which does something very different. And the draconic chart, rather than orienting the zodiac to the equinoxes and solstices of the earth, it places the zodiac according to the moon nodes. These little horseshoes here are the nodes of the moon, which is where the orbit of the moon crosses along the ecliptic. It's a 16-year cycle, and you can think of it like two hula hoops that are intersecting the orbit of all the other planets and the sun, and the moon is tilted at an angle. And where those two hula hoops meet is where the moon nodes are. And so when there's a full moon or a new moon when it's crossing the nodes, that's when an eclipse happens. That's how you can think about it. So this next chart is called a draconic chart. And you'll notice that it's the same chart, but now these little horseshoes, the north and south node, are what are placed on this axis of the zodiac. So it just tilts the chart according to where the nodes are. And so it's the same aspects, it's the same relationships between the planets, but now we see them in different signs. And this chart I think of more as a like soul blueprint of like where our personal soul, it's like more of like our dharma. If you're familiar with Buddhist concepts, it's like our soul purpose. Whereas the tropical zodiac is more this, it's like the daytime, it's what our outer personality is doing, our human life. And then the lunar, looking at this draconic chart, is like the inward, what is happening more in our soul, in our inner soul. And so you can see here that it's in the draconic chart, Pluto, Mars, and Venus are still squarely in Capricorn. So it's like on the soul level, there's still this like depth of exploration happening through Capricorn. It's like there's like the energy of vitality, and what we love is still oriented to like this leadership. Excuse me. And this Sun, Saturn, Mercury conjunction, rather than being in Pisces about dreaming, is in Aquarius. So on a soul level, we're much more in this realm of opening these kinds of patterns in how we collaborate with other people. Whereas the moon, our feeling center in our deeper soul, feeling expression is about our creativity. Leo is about our personal creativity and stepping into sovereignty. And then Jupiter, where we're expanding, is in Aries, which is about our personal identity. So it's this different way of looking at it. So there's these different like levels of being that are happening. Something to meditate on and think on. Interestingly here, I didn't talk about Chiron in the other chart, but Chiron here, in the other chart too, it's still conjuncting the nodes, but Chiron is where the wounded healer is. And in the Draconic chart, Chiron is conjunct here, aligning with the cusp between Pisces and Aries, which is a very interesting point in the zodiac. It's the threshold from sleeping into waking. It's the movement out of the liminal space into our personal identity. So Chiron and our soul expression here is having a moment of, it's like our future trajectory, being in this moment of healing where our deeper wounds are around our identity and how we bring our dreams forward into our identity. Very interesting to see the different patterns, how they overlap between the two charts. Great. So now I'm going to talk about a third chart. Okay, my computer died, so picking it back up midstream here. Here we go. All right. So what I was just saying is that there is a concept in Chinese medicine called the three Wei Qi fields. And the Wei Qi fields are these layers of the energy body going out from our physical body. In this concept, there is a first Wei Qi field, which is just the thin layer right on top of our physical body, that's connected to what's happening in our body, our physical experience in the moment. The second Wei Qi field is connected to our relationships, everything that we have a concept of, our things in the kind of immediate, like our memories in this body and things we're thinking about in the future. It's sort of like our emotional and mental landscape that we're conscious of. And then the third Wei Qi field is this much further out field of energy that's connected to all of our past lives, all of our future lives, everything that we're connected to on this much bigger level. So you could think of it as like we have our small individual self, our personality, our ego, that's one layer. And then we have this like our higher self, our guiding self, which is feeding us information at this level of like how we're engaging as a soul, you know, in the trajectory of life. And then there's the infinite, this much bigger layer of everything that, you know, we're all one being in this broader cosmic universe. And these three charts, the way I've come to see it is these three charts represent those three layers. So the first, the tropical chart, is the personality. The chart that we're looking at most frequently, the most astrology observes, is looking at this layer of what is happening on the surface level of things, of like these events taking place in the physical embodied realm. So it's really important to look at that stuff. Then when we look at the draconic chart, we're looking more at this emotional, inner, like higher self realm of the second Wei Qi field. And then there's a third chart, which is the heliocentric chart. And the heliocentric chart is totally different because this chart is putting the sun at the center of the solar system. And what do the planets actually look like from the perspective of the sun? And so you can see there that the circle with the X is the position of the Earth, which, because it's the full moon, the Earth is in the same position as where the moon is going to be, because it'll be in the opposite position. If we look at the tropical chart, which is this one, the Earth will always be at the opposite point in the heliocentric chart, because if you can think about the Earth and the Sun and where they're positioned from our perspective versus from the Sun's perspective. So in the heliocentric chart, the houses are here. I should have turned them off because there's no houses. These numbers going around, there's no houses in the heliocentric chart because it's from the perspective, the houses are from the perspective of the Earth. There's no moon position. And so we're looking at the actual position of the planets in the solar system. And it's an interesting history to this because, when Copernicus started introduced his model of the sun being at the center of the solar system in Europe, it got adopted by astronomers, but not by astrologers. Astrologers kept this old model of putting the Earth at the center of the universe, at the center of the solar system. And I think there's a value to that because it's like, okay, seeing from our perspective what's happening in the sky, that's important. But it's actually not the reality of what's happening. And so, like on this, in the broader picture. And so I think it's really important to, in astrology, to look at both of these charts and see how they differ in order to get a sense of like what is happening in this broader perspective of things. And I see the heliocentric chart as like what's happening in the collective soul. This is much more of like what is this like highest level of the spiritual development that's happening. And you can see that some of the planets are in pretty similar positions and some of them are in totally different positions. So we can see here that Mars and Venus are not conjuncting in the heliocentric chart. They're both in Capricorn still. We can see Pluto pretty much in the same position, just cresting into Aquarius from Capricorn. Jupiter and Uranus already fully conjunct in Taurus in the heliocentric chart. So on this collective soul level, we're already in this era of this like innovation of the expansion of how systems of material resource and stability in the physical world are operating. In this chart also that this Jupiter-Uranus conjunction is making a trine with Mars. So this smoothly flowing energy with the vitality opening in business and rulership. So from this like higher perspective, there's this that's like the patterns around this like money and leadership is even stronger. Also, this Jupiter-Uranus making a square with Mercury in Aquarius. So it's this the Mercury being this opening into how we think about interacting with people in collaborative ways, being a challenge for this like grounding and connecting into new ways of being with material reality. Very interesting to see the differences in this chart. And then Neptune here in Pisces making a smoothly flowing relationships, this blue line, the sextile with both Pluto and this Uranus Jupiter conjunction here. So Neptune being creating an expansion into the dreaming and making that actually a smoothly flowing relationship with how we connect with material things. Another very interesting thing to look at about the chart when we see it in this way, the Earth over here is the only planet that's on this whole, like what you could call the Western hemisphere of the Zodiac. So the Zodiac can be split many different ways. So from the IC or the Imam Cheli in the Zodiac between Gemini and Cancer, up to the midheaven between Sagittarius and Capricorn. This whole side it is empty of all the planets except for these asteroids, Ceres, Pallas, Juno, and Vesta. Very interesting. The 4 major asteroids in the asteroid belt also on this side, along with Earth. So Earth in Virgo, and then all of these other planets are here. So I see this as like a kind of pulling. While our earthiness is wanting to connect with service, there's all of these other planets in these patterns of like, how are we looking at rulership? How are we examining, working together and bringing our dreams and our material resources forward? Whereas the energy of Earth is saying, how do we be of service? How do we connect to being of service of other people? And that really feels like this kind of grounding point in this whole chart. And like the moon being in Virgo too, and it's like that would always happen on the full moon, that the Earth and the moon would be in the same position in the tropical and the heliocentric chart. So connecting to this element of service, like through all of this, and going back to the beginning, through connecting to the energy of fire and the desires of the witch and the structure of the emperor, how can we make it be of service? How can we connect it and ground it into that? So those are some of the larger patterns that are taking place. A lot going on, a lot happening. It's an exciting time to be alive. And just again, to reiterate, it's like these are waves of energy that we can surf. These are patterns that are happening that we can be aware of and know when to take advantage and know when to expect other things to happen. For me personally, this next 6 weeks that I talked about until April 1st, when Mercury goes direct, it's a very big up in the air time for me. It's like a lot of fire energy is going to be needed, a lot of moving towards the desires and creating structure. It's very, very appropriate, like all of these patterns for myself. And I wonder how it's playing out for each of you. And if you want to drop me a comment, I'd be happy to read and respond to them. I hope you like this video. If you're still watching, please give me a like and subscribe. Click the description, the link in the description below to sign up for my newsletter to learn more about all of this and these patterns in the Eternal Dragon and how we can use it to bring about the best version of ourselves, to remember our immortal nature, because there's so many pressures coming towards us on the planet right now, and in this era of human history, and it's up to us to reconnect to these ancient memories, and these wisdom teachings have this doorway into that. And so would love to connect with you and for you to join my community and our community as we explore this amazing adventure of life together. Hope you enjoyed the video. Peace.